Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome members of the public.
You're welcome.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a regular council meeting, February the 25th. And the approval of the agenda. Hope you're all ready to go, Eva. Told me if you weren't.
Yeah, we're good, we're live.
And introductory items.
There's 2 items on table, one from Kathy Buchanan regarding, or both, one from Kathy Buchanan and one from Kenny Gabriels regarding the rezoning for 730 Buchanan Road.
All right.
And that's all.
Okay, thank you. So somebody move the approval of the agenda. Thank you, David. Second. Thanks, Noel. Yeah, all in favor? Thank you. Public comments. What do we have?
We have 2 this evening. Colleen O'Neill regarding the health center.
Good evening, Colleen.
I want to start by thanking you all for all the work you do, how overworked and underpaid you all are, except for Kathy. Okay, so this is about the health center. Attention, Mayor and Council. The health center seems to be in the crosshairs as Council reconsiders monetization of the community lands. I know I'm preaching it to the converted when I talk about the need for a health center. I know you all want one. But there seems to be some uncertainty on Council about where to best locate it. I would like Council to think about our health center, not in terms of a commercial building, but as Bowen Island's patient medical home. This language is how many communities across Canada now describe exactly what we're trying to build on Bowen. A community of practitioners located together, a home for all our healthcare and health education in one welcoming space. We envision our beautiful building set among the homes and villages and businesses, not separate or hidden from the community, but as the focal point of our village where people live and work. It will be a vital gathering space with people coming and going every day, young families getting their kids immunized, a baby clinic with the local health nurse, group sessions for diabetics and others with chronic diseases, people coming and going for physio and massage appointments, or to life labs, or to see a specialist. It's hard not to think that it would be an obstacle to development, but would enhance the saleability of the land and viability of any businesses to have a vibrant health center in Lot 3 as part of a truly walkable village. We're building the health center through private donations from your friends and neighbors. By locating the health center in the most ideal location, Lot 3, the municipality can send a signal that it sees the health of its citizens as a high-value use of the community lands. Thank you for listening to our pleas once again. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Colleen.
Tim Rose regarding the health center.
Good evening. I'm here actually going to read a letter from Alva McNestry, who's on our Health Services Committee. She's a retired MD and also retired from the College of Physicians and Surgeons, where she was in charge of physician health. The health center is not just a building. It will be a vital healing place for our community, a place where we care and are cared for. Before I go on, the other members of the Health Services Committee are Dr. Matt Blackwood, Dr. Suzanne Schloebel, Clive Jones, Jennifer McGowan, Susan McIntyre, Sujata Connors, and Sandy Duncan. Those of us who are members of the, so you have to picture me as a red-headed Irish lady.
No problem.
Those of us who are members of the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation's Health Services Committee have worked for many years in a variety of roles, either as healthcare providers or collaborators, and most of us have also been patients. We share a common enthusiasm to see a better provision of healthcare services for the permanent residents of Bowen Island, as well as for our seasonal population of family members, friends, and visitors. The Foundation is trying to build far more than a mere facility. We estimate that there are over 100 individuals and/or groups who live on Bowen and work in healthcare-related fields, both on and off island. With this enormous pool of knowledge and talent, we are not yet maximizing our potential to connect, collaborate, and work together on building healthy lifestyles for our community. Many islanders currently go off island to see doctors, dentists, and other healthcare providers, or to access rehabilitation and preventative care health services that could be provided on island if the facilities were available. The Bowen Island Community Health Center will be a supportive environment for healthcare and will provide the best holistic model for care of patients. Modern healthcare no longer only focuses on acute medical care. Increasingly, the focus is on long-term treatment of chronic diseases such as diabetes, chronic lung and kidney disease, heart failure, many cancers, and mental health conditions such as mood disorders and substance abuse. Chronic diseases and conditions require a collaborative treatment approach to help patients achieve and maintain the best quality of life. Many require regular team-based follow-up. For many in our community, the need to travel off-island to access such treatment is a significant barrier. This is especially true for those who have young children, are elderly, or have disabilities. The Foundation plans to build and operate a community health center in which we can recruit a group of healthcare providers who will provide a collaborative model of care that engages community partners in developing, promoting, achieving, sustaining healthy lifestyles, and that helps individuals living with chronic conditions to achieve a higher quality of life. The volunteers of the Foundation have worked tirelessly over 4 years to fill this critical health gap. It has been a stressful stop-and-go process. Numerous times the goal has been within reach, only to be wrenched away. Now once again, the initiative is being questioned and jeopardized. The promised land, the terms of the lease agreement, the size of the facility are all being reconsidered and questioned. These continuous delays and uncertainty add severe risks to fundraising, recruiting, and timeline goals. They also threaten to compromise the collaborative care model that is our fundamental goal. For optimal impact, the health center must be accessible and convenient to patients. This means the facility needs to be built on an easily accessed lot with adequate parking close to the pharmacy and on a bus route. Some have questioned the proposed size of the building of 8,000 square feet. The size of the building is being driven by the health services needs of the community, which has been proposed in collaboration with health providers, future tenants, and design professionals. It is also important that the center be flexible in its design so that as our current population of approximately 4,000 people increasingly turn to healthcare providers on island, and as our population increases, we have the ability to provide additional space and services as needed. Every health center administrator we have talked to wishes they built a larger facility. Health service needs do not decline, they typically increase. For those of us who've been healthcare providers, our end goal is the provision of integrated healthcare. We see a health center where doctors, dentists, physiotherapists, nurses, and other allied healthcare providers work together to provide a collaborative model of healthcare that means our families and neighbors no longer have to leave the island for so many of the health issues they face. We hope that Council will share our vision and support without further delay this plan for a healthier community and a health center in the heart of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That's it? Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the consent agenda. Anybody have anything that they would like to see expanded here? Really? That's it?
Don't question.
All right.
Adoption of the consent.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well done, sir. I'll second that as I've just arrived at anything to move it on.
All right, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That's got to be a first.
Excitement.
No, you're just learning which ones are better to not put on consent agenda so they don't get pulled.
Oh, don't wreck it.
All learning
It's a gift
process.
from Michael from the
So delegations, Hope?
Thanks,
You guys are
guys.
supposed to stay.
Yeah. No.
Look at the audience. We need the audience.
Business arising from the minutes. Emma, short-term rental work program.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm just doing a presentation on a work program for developing a short-term rental policy for Bowen Island. And this was a result of a council resolution at the end of last year directing staff to develop a work plan for community consultation process to develop short-term vacation rental policy. And this, I think this all came about because short-term rentals are becoming quite common on Bowen Island. It's a source of valuable income for some people, provides lodgings for visitors, and contributes to the local tourism industry. However, with a lack of local government regulation, there are concerns that it is impacting housing affordability and availability. There are also concerns around impacts on the neighborhoods as far as security and noise. The land use bylaw currently only allows bed and breakfast use as a home occupation and commercial guest accommodations. It does not permit short-term rental of a dwelling unit in any of our residential zones. How short-term rentals are regulated in other municipalities range widely, from very little regulation to complete prohibition. So the scope of the work program is to determine which approach is actually appropriate for our community on Bowen Island. An emphasis here is for the community, so the work program is focused around engagement to determine what the community needs and what the concerns are. And this will be done following policy number 1802 for public participation. The work program is developed over 4 phases. The first one is to build foundational knowledge, so that is our current existing conditions, the data, as well as best practices, what other municipalities are doing. The second phase is where we bring all that knowledge to the public and engage the community and involve them in collaborating for a policy. The third phase is to draft that policy and bring it through the adoption process. And the last phase is to implement the policy, including monitoring, enforcement, and evaluation. All 4 phases will take about 12 months of work. And to supplement this work program, there is a public participation plan to ensure comprehensive engagement throughout the entire project. This plan spells out 4 objectives, including fostering project awareness, providing information to the community, and identifying the community needs, and maintaining communications throughout the project. It also identifies the key stakeholder groups, a wide range of communication tools to connect with those groups, and 11 unique engagement initiatives. Each of these initiatives will be evaluated individually, and at the end of the project, there will be an overall evaluation with a public participation report. This is a part of the municipality's commitment to accountability, and it will show how the whole project met the original objectives. As well, actually most importantly, it's to show how the community engagement contributed to the development of a community-based policy for short-term rentals. So with that, staff recommends that council approve the short-term rental work program and the public participation.
Great, thanks, Emma. Questions? Thoughts?
I'm confused by the use of the word policy. So at the end of 12 months, we're going to have decided whether or not we're going to make amendments to the land use bylaw to regulate short-term rentals?
think,
Because
At
you
the
can't
end-
enforce a policy.
no, at the end of the third phase, so that would be 8 months, we should have a policy adopted that would direct any bylaw amendments that are needed. That would be part of the implementation phase.
I think that is referenced in your report.
You kept using the word policy, I confuse these.
Yeah, Allison?
No? Too long on program.
Okay. Anybody else? Good.
A really good report, Emma. Thought really spelled it out really well. Quite a lot of work, a lot of staff work. Just looking at the budget, and it's just a very small question, but I mean, I really think you've laid it out well, and I really like all the public engagement elements that you've come up with. That's makes it really strong. You've got an online survey for $0. So basically, that's just we tell everybody about it and say, anybody take the survey? Is that what that'll be?
Yeah, I think we'll be using existing municipal resources to promote the survey.
Promoting the survey. No, not using a survey company to actually get random data or anything of that sort. Okay.
Not in the budget,
No,
unless
no,
otherwise
it's not in the
directed.
budget, I saw, yeah, okay. As long as it's really communicated well, the tricky part of any survey like that is the people who are interested or, you know, are fired up about it or whatever. Anyway, it's okay.
It's quite a process. It's amazing. Is that probably the first time the public participation process is actually been utilized? Because it's pretty intense.
The
Yeah.
transportation
yes.
plan and the parks plan.
This is a lot more public participation in this, so it's
Um,
great. That was,
I'm just wondering with the consultation, and maybe I missed it, but are guests or people who are not living or own property on Bowen Island, are they going to be participating in the consultation? And if so, how do you know?
The visitors are actually included in one of the stakeholder groups. And the most effective way to contact them is yet to be determined. And I believe Bowen Tourism will be involved with that.
I think, if I can just
Yeah, by all
continue, I
means.
believe Lime Survey, which I think it's just a technology I know and you know how to use it, and I think you can put in tokens and things like that, so I would, just because this is the kind of thing that can be flooded, but I take it that the survey is only one part, so, okay.
so does anybody have a problem with the work program itself? Seems pretty decent. Okay, I'm gonna read the recommendation. The council approve the short-term rentals work program and public participation.
I've got a question. I think one of the
Sorry,
other
Rod.
things we need to address is
Yes.
the $4,400 funding is not within our current budget,
Oh,
right? That's so as if you approve this, you're also approving a $4,400 expenditure that we have to find a funding source for.
right, okay.
I mean, I was gonna say the stuff definitely within phase 2 is within the planning department budget.
Is it? Oh, okay, sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't realize. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're okay then? Emma?
I was also going to say a large part of the budget comes in the fourth phase for enforcement tools, and that would fall, I think, under next year.
Yeah. So recover some of that, maybe.
Thank you.
Okay, let's try this again. That council approve the short-term rentals work program and public participation plan as attached to staff report dated February 4th, 2019. Second. Thank
Or you move it second, sorry.
Yeah. And any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Allison, opposed?
No,
Okay. All in favor, it's unanimous, thank you. And, okay, Sarah. Oh, Sarah's here.
We were talking about skunks and
Yeah,
some other interesting stuff.
Nothing.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm gonna go through the invasive animal species report. So in early November, council received a letter from the public stating concern about the introduction of raccoons, skunks, and gray squirrels on Bowen, and the potential risk to people, animals, and property. So in response to this, at the November 26th meeting, council directed staff to research and report back on regulatory authority that Bowen may have, as well as potential strategies for managing these species, and to provide some alternatives that individuals may use to help manage the species as well. So just to note, the species that are identified are not actually considered invasive. So the invasive species legislation doesn't actually apply, but there is provincial legislation regarding wildlife. So under the spheres of concurrent jurisdiction environment and wildlife regulation, a local government may regulate, prohibit, and impose requirements in relation to wildlife under Schedule B and C of the designation and exemption regulation. So those three species that were identified are listed under Schedule B or C. So for this reason, you can potentially impose a bylaw in relation to these animals. So some of the potential strategies include a bylaw, as I mentioned, which would focus more on regulating the behavior of residents to prohibit activities which would encourage these conflicts. One thing I'll note is that there is an existing bylaw that already addresses this to an extent, because our property maintenance bylaw requires that properties are maintained in a manner that averts risk to public health and whatnot. So for that reason, staff are not recommending that option. Another option would be to cull or capture these species, and part of that process would require a general wildlife permit from Flynn and consent from all the private owners that would apply to, and then the hiring of licensed trappers. And I did get in touch with one company that kind of gave a rough estimate about what the cost would be, but obviously we don't know the numbers of species or how this would go about, so we don't have the final financials on that. But we are also not recommending this due to the lack of evidence of a cull's effectiveness. There's some mixed outcomes on that. And another alternative is to adopt an invasive species management strategy to focus on the prevention, eradication, containment, and control of the species. But at this time, we're not recommending that either due to the cost. So what staff are recommending is promoting education, focusing on public awareness of the pest species, including a mail drop or advertising and in the paper and that kind of thing.
I was just going to add, sorry, the invasive species management plan, we should go back to one. So that was identified in the parks plan as a future priority, and it put it for invasive species on parkland, and it estimated a cost of $40,000 for doing that on parkland. So we're not sure expanding it to species across the island would be more expensive.
I took that to mean invasive plants, not wildlife.
Yeah.
It does,
Yeah.
Typically
But
it
it
does,
could.
but yes, exactly, like the local government would have
frogs
the
or
ability,
something,
yeah, to pick which species would be covered under the invasive management strategy, so they could include these species even though they're not technically considered invasive, so, yeah. Okay. Then we also provided in your package some information that landowners can undertake on their property to potentially reduce the conflicts with these species, including removing potential food sources, placing lights at the den entrance of these species, or installing one-way door. So that's available for the public as well. But yes, going back to our recommendation, the council directs staff to continue education on reducing these conflicts, including information on websites and featuring things in the island page and an island-wide mail drop.
So you want to move that? Very good. Motion.
Okay, I'll move it.
All right, seconds, thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just, I'm happy to do this through the educational approach at this time. However, having been on the island for over 25 years, I've seen the gray squirrels come, and I've seen the skunks come, and I know we've had a couple of raccoons rattling around, and I know there were more raccoons in the past that locals generally would call a farmer about, or something like that. And I know that Gambier Island has lots of raccoons right next door. So, right, Kathy? So I also know that people get in touch with me about these things, and they say, how do I get rid of these skunks?
Yep.
And I say, are you feeding your cats outdoors? Do you have a dish of cat food outside the back door? Well, yeah, but I've never seen a skunk. But they come at night. They're also feeding rats, they probably don't know. So I think an education program will really help. And I also think that a focus on raccoons as the next potential would be a good idea. Because I've heard of wildlife coming here in the sightings from people about the pest management companies. But I also have heard about animals coming here in storage containers, and when they're open, animals leap out. Stored from other parts of Canada that have been closed for a month. And I'm sure they come in other ways as well. So I just think the next one that I'm worried about is raccoons. And particularly if we get the pest control company situation, or, I mean, all it takes is two of this different sex. I think we probably have two of the same sex now that have been rattling around on Bowen for a long time, according to the people I talked to at Cause. And whatever they are, wildlife care and wildlife something. Sorry, I can't remember what the name of Cause is. And so I would just maybe suggest using perhaps raccoons as a focus in the communications and education as something that could come. Also, the other one that I think could happen is, from what I've heard, is release of pet fish, and including goldfish and koi. I've had several people call me when the summers are droughty, drying up, the ponds are drying up, and they're going, what should I do to help my koi? Or should I just release them into the lake? And I'm going, no, because that could really damage the lake. Koi are a kind of carp, and they root around in the mud, and they completely can change the ecology of a lake. So and bullfrogs and things like that we haven't had, although I get occasionally people say that they have heard them or seen them. So those are kind of focus critters that you might want to keep an eye on, or focus on in the communications and education as something that may seem cute and pet-like, but if they want to help their pets, call somebody who can help, like Cause or me or the Humane Society, and for better suggestions, because they could cause a lot of damage. Anyway, that's my suggestions. It's why I'm happy to support this.
Yeah, it's definitely a communication and education piece, there's no question about that, David, personally.
So I support this, but I'm worried that some people, the people who've been talking to me won't support it. They'll feel we're wimping out. If you could go back to your previous slide, please, of the Cove. One more, yeah. So from the research that I did in this, and I saw it in the report, and I don't remember the numbers, for capturing, you're not allowed to move them very far anyway. So you're not supposed to do that. So we couldn't get a reputable organization to capture them and then go take them off the island or kill them.
The company that I had spoken to said they would take them off the island.
But they're not allowed.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to take them more than a kilometer or 500 meters every day.
Yeah.
I think that kind of information is, you're not allowed to.
Yeah.
No, that's
No.
what,
Yeah.
So I feel in the communication, we need some explanation of why we can't do that. And by the way, on Saturday morning, friend saw a coyote.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know if coyotes can kill skunks, but it would be useful perhaps.
Yeah.
Where? As an
Just near your house.
My house?
Yeah, the entrance to the park. I was walking the dog, and a couple of people saw it and said, yeah, it's a coyote.
Okay.
So, just to the park entrance,
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
How it got here, who knows? Did somebody?
Well, let's confirm the sighting first and that
Sure.
kind of thing, but
Yeah.
I remember when the wolf dog.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't ask to speak. But I remember when the wolf dog was here, and when it snowed, you could easily see their tracks were completely different from dog tracks. And so I would encourage anybody who may be listening, if they see a coyote, or they think they do, or they see signs of coyotes, like droppings in the middle of a trail, or animals in the house being upset. perhaps, I hesitate to say call staff, but I think if there's one, we should find out, because it could be a female like the squirrel I saw those 26 years ago. Yes. Anyway.
Who would you report that to? Police?
Well,
Me or
I
not?
would report it to Carla,
Yeah.
and she would figure out what to do.
Yeah,
Oh,
at least we could give that information to the province, but yeah, I think that's a good idea as well, is to let staff know, at least we can get together a list. What's out there. And if there's multiple sightings, then.
Yeah. Right.
And I'll be supporting the recommendation as well. But like Dave, I do have a sense that there will be members of the public who'll think we're shirking a responsibility that they individually are not able to take on. So there are certain areas of the island, some of the more densely populated areas of the island where the skunk problem is more of a problem than in some other places. So I was curious about whether in your research on this, Sarah, if you found any neighborhood level strategies, so not government, not individuals, but neighborhood level strategies that might work.
I haven't really looked into that. I don't know. But I guess for the culling and not capturing, the general wildlife permit is done by an area. So like if there was a specific area with a bunch of private landowners, you could potentially, get the permit for that specific area and get the consent from those specific landowners and move forward with that. But yeah, I haven't.
Could a group of individual landowners then?
Yeah, they could as well.
They could
Yeah,
make
it doesn't have to be
requests.
a municipality submitting that application.
One of the things we may be able to do is post something on Civic Info, you can just for free of charge, because the municipalities on the mainland have to deal with these sorts of issues all the time. To see if there are strategies that other municipalities empower neighborhoods to undertake. But if you just put a question out on Civic Info and hear back from other meetings.
I asked that question regarding skunk, Metro Vancouver Park staff, and they looked somewhat bemused, and they said, no, we don't have a significant issue with skunks in the metro parks.
Maybe because of natural predators. Lots of coyotes.
So,
Yeah, I just, I want to add to that idea of culling. I mean, my field is wildlife education. I used to work at a nature center and received all those calls. I used to work with Metro Vancouver Parks. I ran a nature info line. In Edmonton, I lived in Skunk Hollow. And let me tell you, it's not a black and white issue. I've been waiting to see that. No, I am. I think that we on Bowen have a higher irritation level with skunks because we haven't had them before. Many places in Canada obviously live with them. And there are ways to handle them, and I think that's partly what I'm assuming you'll do in the education part of them. Not just the lighting, but the keeping the food inside and the playing music underneath your house, or letting the, running the sprinkler into there for a little bit or something. There's lots of different ways. But the idea of a cull or a capture, some people say, well, let's get rid of all of them. And sure, it'll cost a little bit and then that'll be it. It costs a lot. I'm familiar with the costs of trying to get rid of rats, for example, from seabird nesting islands. It's very difficult, and it usually involves poison baits and things like that that we may not want to. I will say, though, that positive things are birds of prey. So anybody who has owls near their property, or let's put it this way, anybody who's got concerns about skunks or rats, encourage the owls. And you could do that by not putting out poison bait, because the modern poison baits are so powerful and they build up through the food chain that you can be damaging the raptors who would do it for free. So anyway, raptors are the solution. I'm supporting this.
just get yourself some raptors.
Yeah. That's right.
Somebody want to read the
Yep, I will.
recommendation?
Sure. that council direct staff to continue education on reducing wildlife conflicts, including providing information on the municipal website, periodically featuring information in the island page, and disseminating information through an island-wide mail drop.
So moved, second. David? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, unanimous. All right, thanks, Sarah. Okay, so staff reports, we're gonna move to a committee of the whole now, so we'll put this on recess, the council meeting. And the council will move to the committee of the whole. Can I have a second? All right, so all in favor? Thank you. Here we are. And 7.2, Emma, overview on rezoning application, 750 Buchanan Road.
Hello again. This property was brought for introduction, this application was brought for introduction to previous council. And before we go into first reading, I'm just going to give you another introduction. It's a fairly large rezoning application. We'll dive right into it. The location is mid-island, it's just west of Grafton Island, at the end of Buchanan Road, for those that may not be familiar. Most of the property is zoned rural residential 1, and in 2015, the southeastern corner of the lot, as you see in the purple, was zoned industrial commercial variation A. Most of this lot is under a mines permit, and the uses under this area falls under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Petroleum Resources. The industrial commercial zone allows these principal uses, and the variation for this zone is to prohibit sale of propane. There's currently some workshops, storage, and gravel sales on the lot, and the applicant would like to propose an impound facility, temporary storage and sorting of solid waste, and processing of green waste, mainly wood chipping. Just a little bit of discussion around these proposed uses.
We're close. It's a long way to clear in the Cove.
This is the first picture that had creative comments. So I think all of you are aware of what an impound facility use entails. There is currently no such use in the land use bylaw, and also there is no impound facility on Bowen. So what that means is any vehicle that requires to be impounded needs to be taken off the island, so there's greater costs involved. Temporary storage and sorting of solid waste. For this particular application, we are referring to green waste and scrap metal. For green waste, this would fall under the use of transfer station as defined in the land use bylaw. However, scrap metal, if the purpose is for recycling and there's value in it, it may not be considered solid waste. It would be more appropriately considered the use of recycling depot, which is in the land use bylaw, permitted in the industrial medium zone, but not defined. There is no definition for recycling depot right now. And similar to the impound facility, there's currently no licensed transfer station on Bowen. What this means is green waste on any particular site needs to be directly transported off the island. This often results in inefficient transportation to dispose of green waste. The processing of green waste. This would fall under the use of compost facility as it was intended in the G3A zone for Radar Hill. It's also consistent with the term used in Metro Vancouver. However, there is no compost facility defined, so it's not explicit whether or not it includes wood chipping at this point. The application has gone for preliminary referral to the Advisory Planning Commission, and generally the commission supports impound facility use with these conditions. They would like to see it only used for temporary vehicle storage, and that the lot is fenced and secured. They are also concerned about the impound rates. For the first 2 points, they will be covered by the proposed definition for impound facility. However, regarding the third concern, impound rates are actually set by the province, so we don't really have a say in the rates as anyone else in the province. They also supported transfer station use as long as it's licensed by Metro Vancouver. And this use does require a license for Metro Vancouver. And they require that any application comply with local government zoning before they approve a license. So that is why we're undergoing this current rezoning application. The APC did not support wood chipping use. From internal staff reviews, several key concerns did come up. I'd say one of the biggest ones is noise from the wood chipping. This should be addressed by the municipal noise control bylaw, and also staff strongly suggest that a noise impact assessment be required of the applicant to determine the extent of the impacts and also attenuation measures. Another major concern is road safety. The current road, Buchanan Road, that leads up to this property is substandard. The proposed uses will increase industrial truck traffic on a road that also accommodates residential traffic. So for this concern, staff would recommend that a transportation impact study be undertaken to determine the extent of these impacts, as well as recommendations to ensure road safety for all the users.
Emma, did you check historical data? Because that road was approved by the municipality years ago, so.
That was in the Buchanan Museum.
Yes, so when I say substandard, I'm referring to our current subdivision development servicing standards that were recently
But
adopted.
historically, it was approved by the municipality.
At the time of subdivision, yes. Yes. But if we were to, council were to consider these proposed uses, those standards don't. The current road does not meet the required standards.
How wide is the road?
I don't actually have that number, but it's definitely a lot.
I mean, the
Narrower.
road could be widened to a proper two-lane road in the existing road allowance.
It may, but the actual road allowance is really narrow.
The actual paved roads. Yeah.
The road allowance, like
Well, so the dedicated road allowance isn't wide enough to have a standard two-lane road.
yeah, and I wouldn't be able to say for sure. That's
Thought it was
why
66.
transportation impact study should be undertaken.
I didn't look up that.
Do you want to finish up, Emma, or Maureen, you got something now that you want to?
Yeah, just a question about a noise impact assessment. How is that done?
Again, I don't know the details, but they are done for cases very similar to this. Often it's for determining noise impacts from industrial activities on non-industrial areas, surrounding areas.
I'm just asking because I know that I live in the valley, and I know that there are times of the year I can hear people at the Rock at Grafton Lake, and I certainly can hear athletic field activities. The logger sports just echoes beautifully into our front yard. And when there's activity in Eddie's Pit, I can hear that as well. So the comments that were made in the letters that we received about the valley functioning as a natural amphitheater, based on my experience, that's very true. So I was curious about time of year that it would be done, because it's quite variable. You could do an impact assessment at one point and everything sounds fine, and then at another time it might not be for residents. Just a caution.
That's a good point, yeah. So,
Yeah, I have a similar question. I also have been at people's homes near Laura Road, and you could hear the radio playing across the valley, depending on the, I don't know how long they had it set, but it is a natural amphitheater, and I'm wondering, thinking about the gravel proposal for, what's it called? Creek?
Radar, no?
No, the up how sound, the gravel mine?
Oh,
McNabb, that's it.
McNabb Creek.
Anyway, they asked that gravel, because of the concerns there were about wildlife and neighbors, there was talk about putting the gravel operation inside some kind of shelter that it would help mitigate the noise. In fact, I think it was actually a fabric structure that they were proposing. I'm not sure what ever came out of it, but would a noise impact assessment include options like enclosure?
Yeah, that's the main goal, main purpose of the study is to recommend noise attenuation measures to bring down noise levels. And it could include something like an enclosure.
Right, great, good, because I understand some things are much noisier than other things and that there could be perhaps dust and things like that as well. I don't know how you would assess that, but I had been thinking about this not so much as a wood chipper, which people may have seen beside the road, but as a stump grinder, which is a tub, and anyway, quite a different thing. So is that what your understanding is, that when you talk wood chipping, that it actually could be grinding up stumps?
It would include grinding of stumps.
Thank you. Okay.
Go ahead.
I can add a little bit about the noise, because this machine actually was put in beside our house when they did some clearing. And it's quite an amazing machine. It handled huge stumps and things that you'd think, okay, what on earth is going to happen to that? But the noise is astonishingly loud. I can't imagine what kind of like fabric. It sounded like a plane was taking off right beside our house. And I talked to Eddie about it, and he admitted it's incredibly loud. And it's a big, old beast of a machine. But I mean, it does do amazing work. Like, somebody's got to do that. At the APC, we talked about this, and we recommended that it just be moved to wherever the grinding needs to be done. It's horrible, but it's only for, a day. Yeah.
It's portable?
Yeah, it can be towed behind a truck. Yeah.
So right now, grinding on site is permitted under the land use bylaw as an accessory use. The idea of the applicant that is proposing is to allow for the stumps and the wood to come to the site, and consolidate on site for chipping. The recommendation for a noise impact assessment is just to provide council with additional information for consideration.
Anybody else? Yeah, I think, the concern last time when this was brought up, the last time in 2015, I guess, was the noise, and it was just over the top. So that's something we're gonna have to take into consideration. I don't mind moving this on to first reading, and I'm trying to get some of this information that, the noise impact assessment, and somebody look at that road, because that's the other big concern there.
Yeah.
And with those two in hand, we can better assess how this carries on. Maureen?
Green waste. Is green waste defined in the land use bylaw? Is it defined anywhere?
It's defined under Metro Vancouver.
Okay. And it would be restricted to, how is it defined?
I don't actually have that definition with me.
So I'm just worrying about slippage into other kinds of waste. And so organics, for example, could be considered solid waste, but they wouldn't necessarily be considered green waste. So what's the waste that's going to be consolidated on this site? Is something I'd like to know about.
Clarification on that.
That's one of the questions I have, is compost facility processing solid waste. I would rather it said green waste, if that is the intention, then it should say green waste. I'm also a little concerned about the definition of manufacturing of wood products, because I don't consider shingle mills, veneer mills, or plywood mills light manufacturing or intermediate manufacturing. But that's in the definition of manufacturing of wood products. This file started back in 2008, I think, or 12, when the first rezoning happened, or started. But one of the there was two definitions in there, we've taken one of them out. There's there was two definitions in, for wood, and you're taking one of them out? What were the two called? I can't find it in the report right
The
now.
other one was the milling, shaping, and finishing of wood.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure why we had the manufacture of wood products in there, other than I think you were thinking of maybe cutting logs and turning them into boards. And, you know, a small mill like we have, but not a great big huge sawmill, but a small mill that would. And but the other one was the one I think that everybody was wanting, because that was more the cottage industry definition of taking the local wood and turning it into furniture or something like that. So that isn't really, I'm not sure that that kind of home-based business type of thing is captured. You've got the use or milling of logs, but then, you know, then you got sawmills, planing mills, shingle mills. I don't know that any, you know, can we just use or milling of logs? Is there another word? I guess there's small sawmills on the island, but there's not.
Portable.
Yeah, I don't know whether they're portable or whether you use the word small or, you know, and lots of people have home planers which are small or
Yeah.
whatever, but a planing mill, a shingle mill, and veneer mill, and plywood mill, having worked in all those places, are quite different from the local sort of home-based type of business I think the island would be looking to.
Yeah, I don't think, A, there's room for a plywood mill up there, and B, you know, they
No,
still
but-
have to go by the noise regulation.
Well, the plywood, yeah, but that's the other thing, the noise bylaw is, allows noise from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, right? And to have a grinder going from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, 5 days a week, we're far enough away from the gravel pit on Radar Hill, but certain days when the wind's blowing, we've been hearing it quite clearly for the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
So, but it's far enough away that it's just sort of a buzz in the background. But, so I'm not happy with the definition, and I'd really like to see solid waste. And then, the recycling one, land or buildings for receiving, cleaning, sorting, baling, or packing recyclables. So the intention is there is to recycle scrap metal, is that the idea?
To accommodate that proposed use, yes.
You mean that use that's happening? Yeah. Okay. But could there be other things up there too with this broad definition? It could be anything. Old, construction materials, all that stuff.
Yeah, the definition would be for recyclable materials, right now.
Yeah, but that's pretty broad right now, like you can collect bottles, break them up, recycle them. Same with ceramic toilets and all that stuff.
Cardboard.
And transfer station, that's a defined use we've got already? Or is that
Yes.
natural that,
It's defined and it's permitted in industrial medium
okay,
already.
I forgot to look at the definition of transfer station.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, there's actually a couple more slides that would show the proposed
Yeah, we
amendment,
thought
maybe that might help. One of the other concerns is landscape screening. This is already required for industrial lots at lot lines adjacent to highways, but there is nothing required between industrial and residential lots.
Well, isn't there a road that runs along the edge of the property line? That's not a highway?
There is, but it's not
Private
next to any inhabited area. I don't know how far back this is. It's right at the beginning. So there is a road along here, but the residential uses are, I mean, the
I thought there
residential
was
ones.
a road along here so they could drive into these lots.
Not that's considered a highway, it's a driveway.
So the Strata Road or something.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. So we're at landscape screening, so we would need to address some sort of visual screening requirement. This lot is also, the proposed rezoning site is directly adjacent to a riparian area, and it is entirely within the Grafton Lake watershed. So there are a lot of environmental concerns. An environmental management plan has been submitted, and a number of mitigation measures should be undertaken for the proposed uses. And these mitigation measures can be required as part of a development permit, which is required for any of the uses in the future. So the proposed amendment that is detailed in the report essentially is amending the industrial medium zone to include impound facility use, and also a variation, IMA, to allow for the sale of building, construction, home improvement supplies, as well as welding, and to not allow cottage industry. It's also going to require the addition of some land use bylaw definitions, the compost facility to explicitly include wood chipping, impound facility addressing the APC concerns around secure temporary storage, and also including the recycling depot definition. This is the proposed one, which does specify recyclable material, quite general, and this could all be up for discussion, amendment, or changes at this point. Staff also recommends that a covenant and works and services agreement be drafted based a lot on the noise impact assessment as well as the traffic impact study, to provide some additional assurance that the proposed uses, this rezoning, will have minimal impacts on adjacent properties.
Would that include hours of operation?
Definitely, yeah. The proposed amendment actually also includes an additional condition of use. As proposed, it's a restriction on wood chipping operations, including stuff grinding, between the hours of 8 and 4 p.m. Yeah, and those can be adjusted as well.
So,
Comment first and then a question. I also just wanted to point out the community amenity of the trail easement. So this would be what people refer to as the Cross Island Trail that runs along the bottom of Mount Gardner there. And as it's just noted that it's in the parks plan, right? And it does, I think there's a lot of people who would be interested in that. And but I see your point about the mines permit. Do we know if the mines permit covers all of the property, or?
Just a portion, and I did receive a note from Allison about the area. The permit I have on file is very old. I don't know if I actually have it here. And it's really hard to make out what the area is in the photocopy, I guess. I think I have it here.
In the report we had the last time, it talked about the remaining 7.63 hectares will continue to be used for rock quarries and gravel operations under the Municipal Energy Lines permit. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those.
I've requested an updated copy from the mines inspector. I've yet to receive it, but he did confirm that the proposed trail location was completely within the permit area, and they wouldn't approve that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And my second question is about the compost facility at Radar Hill. I remember when that went through council those years ago, and it was supposed to be gravel crushing that would turn into a compost facility. That's partly why the council had approved or supported the road going up through Crown Land and a number of other things like that, was with the eye that this would solve the community's problems in the future. Do we know anything about why that hasn't gone ahead yet? Is it just not ready yet? Or?
I do not know.
Okay. Because I would be interested in, that was a lot of work that the council of the day put into rezoning that Radar Hill compost facility to be a compost facility.
Well,
And,
with a regenerated enthusiasm for that, maybe that's something we can knock on their door, because it's a great location for it.
It's worth asking the question, because it was expensive road that was built, and it was Crown Land. There was a whole big process to get the Crown Land freed up for that road, and it it was a significant council and staff time investment kind of thing, and I would think it's worth a phone call or two to find out,
I think
where that's
the road went in long before the compost idea, though.
No, they were, as
Well, there was
as
a
I
new
recall.
road built, and it was all built by the applicant. We didn't put any money into it at all.
No, I know, but we put time into writing the letters of support
And it was
for
a
the
joint
Crown.
application originally, because we were gonna have the compost facility on part of it, and they were gonna have the quarry on the other part, and then
We can ask them the
I
question. I mean,
can't
it's
remember.
15 years ago or
Yeah.
so.
Stuff all goes
why,
missing.
but
But it seems like just
Yeah.
yesterday. But I just think it's worth
Yeah.
asking the question, because
Yeah.
these things, the idea was that it was a long-term kind of thing, so that's
It
my
never got
question.
off the ground, but yeah.
Okay, Michael, and then Maureen.
I think we can see that this is quite a complicated amendment by law with a lot of aspects, a lot of wheels turning. I'm rather inclined to say, well, let's get on with the first reading and let the various processes take place so we can look at this in greater length and opened up exactly as the recommendation is stated, so that we can get on. I think everyone has heard the perfectly legitimate and obvious concerns it raises and some of the advantages it brings as well. So I'm saying, why don't we leave this to due process now to continue? Do our first reading so we can move ahead and see what comes out of the hearings and everything else that's involved, and hopefully we can move it on. I think it is complicated. I think this conversation has highlighted many of the aspects, and I think the process now should with care and deliberation, bring us, hopefully, to the correct conclusion.
Maybe condense things a bit, Maureen.
I support what Councillor Hale just said, moving ahead with first reading. And I guess one of my concerns is that in all the complexities of this rezoning, that we might lose sight of the potential advantages. That there could be a potential impound block, which has been an ongoing issue. If something gets sorted out with the Mines Ministry, perhaps we do get that connecting piece of trail. The disposition of green waste on this island is a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the noise for me is a stumbling block, but if there are ways to mitigate that by sort of sharing the grief and having it be site-specific for work and then bringing things back here, that sounds pretty good. But I do have a bit of trouble getting my head around all the different pieces and the potential scope of those. I can imagine a member of the public hearing about this for the first time and thinking, what do you mean there's going to be a recycling depot and a composting center and an impound lot and this and this and this?
And a plywood mill.
And a plywood mill. What's going on?
Yes, exactly.
Emma, what's the size of the impound lot contemplated?
The applicant hasn't actually given an exact site plan, but the area that was outlined earlier, that's roughly where
Fairly
they
big, yeah.
intend.
That would be pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what that.
Yeah, so
Okay, last one.
that scope point, I think, is important to firm up, and that goes to the definitions as well. Now, if it's really scrap metal that is going to be recycled there, then maybe we need to say it's scrap metal that's going to be recycled there, so that there isn't that broader scope at the outset.
So when the previous rezoning was done, there was a requirement or an agreement that all the uses that weren't supposed to be over in the mine site were all going to be transferred over to the other. So did any of that happen? Have we actually confirmed that the industrial uses in the area between the active quarry and the site of the rezoning that are not part of the quarry operation are to be removed or relocated to the area to be rezoned? Did that actually happen?
I guess first of all, I don't have that agreement, so I can't say. But the reason why the ministry is in the referral list is to confirm that the uses that are in the proposed rezoning area are okay under their mines permit.
If I could just underscore what Allison's saying, there were agreements that were put in place with the last rezoning that I think need to be looked into to see if they were fulfilled. And the reports will be on our hoping that you copy. But this is only in 2015, so they should be on our website.
Yeah, I have the whole file, and I've gone through them, and like I said, I don't recall that specific agreement. It's not on title.
But this was an agreement by resolution, right? Part of what they have to do.
Yeah, I haven't actually checked through all the minutes, I'm going through. I was reading a direct quote from the staff report.
I know too, with the rezoning, I mean, it started as a much larger application and got shrunk down. And so it was checking which of those agreements were sort of as part of the bigger process that then disappeared when they instead said, we'll do a little piece of it.
This is the last one with the shrunk down map
Okay.
that then changed to a slightly different. Now, just to be absolutely clear, everything is to happen in that area labeled A, right? We're not expanding that area.
No, it's the same area as the current zone.
Yeah, so I'm just not quite sure how they're gonna accommodate all these other uses in that same area. So, two other questions. You're talking about staff holding an open house for the application. Is this not the sort of thing where you want the applicant to host and pay for the open house and staff would be there and have it on site? And the other is the environmental, there's a report required from the QP. Would we engage the QP? I haven't read the new provincial legislation, but would we engage the qualified professional and give them the instructions as to what the report we're wanting?
For the studies,
Yes.
like the noise impact?
Yeah.
I leave it up to
Applicant pay
council,
for.
but yeah, the
I don't
applicant
think so.
would be responsible for contracting a qualified professional.
Are we going to set out the terms of what we want the report to
The
cover?
scope.
There-
Scope of the report?
There is a scope already outlined in the subdivision and development servicing bylaw for
Oh.
transportation assessments. The noise assessment is not as common. I think I can find a scope. Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I'm
we could-
thinking the map you've got in our package, and thank you for sending the bigger map, I think it should cover the bigger map area,
Mhm.
not just immediate houses.
Mhm. Okay,
So-
I could draft a scope.
And are you going to arrange a site visit for council?
I think one is in order.
Yeah.
Please. All right, so is that pretty good for the overview? Can we move on from here and then we'll?
Can we let it be clear that we're not happy with the definitions, that they'll be amended as part of the referral process? I mean, having played.
Have you made a note of that? Ed?
I have a note for the recycling definition to specify the scrap metal. I would be inclined to actually put that under the variation as opposed to the actual definition of recycling.
Yeah, because these are projects, but the compost facility, meaning composting of green waste and organic waste, not solid waste.
Put organic waste in there too?
And
Well,
Green waste, I think,
well, I
not
don't know,
organic.
this is green waste, definitely,
Yeah.
but, you know, there was talk about mixing the wood chips with the green waste and the other old, the way to hill one where we were doing it as council.
I think that's a different.
You needed
operation.
the green waste to make the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I do have a note to use green waste in the compost facility definition. And I think we should, I guess, include definition for green waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clearly defined.
Use Metro so we don't,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to refer this to our environment committee as well.
That's a
Part
good
of their
idea.
mandate is compost.
Yeah.
Just add that to the
I
referral.
think that would be good, because the question of what exactly is happening and what the possibilities could be,
Yeah, especially with those,
would be good to get that.
And what has been
with the
produced.
setbacks and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
obviously.
So that brings me to my other, being as this has been, the last report we got was October the 10th, the other one took 3.5 years, and not entirely due to us.
Correct.
Largely not due to us. Could we ask that the bylaw come back to first reading at the next council with the changed definitions and whatever in it, rather than doing it tonight?
How does everybody feel about that? I don't have a problem going ahead with it tonight, with the changed definitions. It's only the first reading.
I am,
But we gotta change them tonight.
I'm inclined to agree. I would prefer to have it come back a little more clearly before we give it first reading. And I'm just still concerned about this planing mills, shingle mills, veneer mills, and plywood mills still being in the, or is this the definition that's coming out?
Can I speak to that? So right now in the industrial commercial zone, it allows two uses that aren't defined. It allows milling, shaping, and finishing of wood, and it allows manufacturing of wood products. So what Emma's proposing is to take out the milling, shaping, and finishing of wood as a use and just have a definition for manufactured wood products. And then the actual effect would be, this property's moved out of that zone, so it would no longer be permitted for this zone, but we felt in the future we want that as a defined term. Anyways, part of the challenge with this site has been that the applicant points to that manufacturing of wood products in terms of I'm permitted to produce wood chips as a wood product. So manufactured wood products isn't defined, I'm manufacturing wood chips. So that's a permitted use, so we'd like to have that sort of, we'd like a definition for manufacturing wood products, and we look to the other properties in this zone and say, no, it's not wood chipping is specifically composting, and it's not
But I
manufacturing.
like your second definition better, that we didn't define the title.
Milling, shaping, and finishing.
Yeah, is more, I think, what we were thinking of, then the type of cottage industry and enabling the wood to be milled and sawed, milled so, and planed so that it could be turned into things made here on the island, not,
I mean, we can,
for use in people's houses and things like
yeah,
that.
we can I think pare down the manufacturing of wood products and cut some of the, like the plywood and the veneer or something and make it more about milling and shaping, because you're right, we have a cottage industry as a use, that would be the carpentry, essentially, would be
Yeah,
the cottage industry would say.
those people could access wood sources here on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, anyway, I support the clarification of the definitions and taking out those big industrial shingle mills and veneer mills and plywood mills, because I don't think they're realistic and I think they would add confusion. And so that, and they're not for the Bowen scale.
Okay. Going back to Allison's comment, the two different terms between manufacturing of wood products and then the other one, milling, finishing, shaping.
Yeah.
Is there a preference?
Yeah, I prefer the milling, shaping, and finishing of wood. Because manufacturing of wood products also takes you into logging territory, which we've heard from Bowen Islanders what they think of that. And I just, that's partly what I mean about adding to the confusion. And and as we've already seen, it can mean many, many, many things.
Why have we got that in there at all? That would be my question. That's not, I don't think it's one of the objectives up there is to set up a mill, is it?
But a small mill.
Well,
Like
set up a
certain
small
people,
mill.
like there's 2 or 3 of those on the island right now.
Yeah, but is that what we're actually trying to do here?
Well, I don't have a problem with maybe enabling,
And you can put a mill, you
That
can
in
put
the-
a planer in there and all the rest
but
of the
in the
stuff.
general definition, and this is the problem where we've got a general definition, and now we're trying to be specific to the site. And all the noise that goes with sawing and everything else, yeah.
I didn't think we were actually thinking of putting a sawmill up there. I never thought it was a transfer station and a few other things.
But the definition is in the list of uses.
We'll just take it right out, that's what I'm saying.
This is why I'm interested in milling, shaping, and finishing.
Yeah.
This is why I agree that first reading should maybe happen at the next council.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Enough said.
confirm, just one
Yeah.
last point. A Am I correct in remembering that the proposed revision will take cottage industry use out of,
For this variation,
for this variation?
so for this rezoning.
And the rationale for taking it out is?
Maybe you can remind us what it is, cottage industry.
Cottage, I don't have the definition in front of me right now, but it's essentially producing products using resources from on site. And it's a very broad, general definition. Yeah, just with all the other uses already proposed for this rezoning, staff had some concern allowing for cottage industry, what else that might lead to on that site.
And they're specific about wood products, so that essentially takes care of the concern if they actually wanted to do that, that would be specified.
The wood products right now, those two that we just discussed, are actually allowed in the industrial commercial zone that it is currently zoned as, but they're not defined.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so do we have some direction that,
I move that we defer this to a future council meeting.
okay, I can vote on it.
Well, we're still in the committee of the whole, so
We can go, we can say in committee will that council direct staff to bring forward the amendments discussed at this meeting for first reading to our March 11th council meeting. That will tidy that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Committee of the whole recommends the council act, etc.
Well, what we can do in committee of the whole is give direction to staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Cove, you comfortable with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Just need a mover and a seconder.
second, all in favor? Thank you. Now you can go home now.
Complex.
All right, Daniel. Next one.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
you two guys are gonna sit back.
No choice.
Come on, Craig.
So for those councillors who haven't met, with us today is Greg Cormier. He's our building inspector. He's here 2 days a week, and he graciously offered to come in as well tonight. We knew step code that he's our expert for any sort of technical questions that you have about the step code and how it would work, and about the building industry and Bowen more generally as well. I'll be listening to Greg. So I'm going to give a sort of a short overview of the BC Energy Step Code and how we propose proceeding, and then we've left a lot of time for questions. If you have any questions about the Step Code or about consultation or implementation of any of those pieces. So in terms of our overarching council direction, so in the Island Plan 2018, priority E1 was to work on the cleaner energy emissions plan, including adoption of the Energy Step Code, and then the draft Island Plan that's up for your consideration later in this meeting identifies the adoption of the BC Energy Step Code as well in 2 different priorities. So just some of the background. So the BC Climate Leadership Plan in 2016 identified a provincial goal to be net zero energy ready by 2032, and the Step Code was established to help meet that goal. So the Step Code is a voluntary provincial standard to achieve more efficient buildings that go beyond the BC Building Code. And sometimes I've heard people heard different things from voluntary. So it's voluntary in terms of municipalities at this stage can voluntarily adopt the Step Code. At that point, it becomes mandatory for buildings. So I've had some confusion that people say, oh, it's voluntary, so people can choose to do it. And say, well, no, the municipality chooses, and then people have to do it. And as well with that voluntary is that when the Step Code was adopted, the province at that point said, set out timelines, which they've since quickened to say, but we intend to adopt step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5 at set time periods. So it's voluntary for municipalities at this point, but they've said, but if you don't, at a certain point, it's going to become mandatory. And what the step code is, it's a performance-based code. So that means that it's done based on energy modeling beforehand. So when you build a building, you get an energy model to identify what its energy use will be, and it's then on-site tested to achieve minimum performance levels. So in that case, there's no prescriptive energy requirements. It doesn't say your wall needs to be this thick or your windows need to be this small or whatever it may be, but it says you need to model it to say that you'll meet the energy requirements, and then you test it to say that you've actually constructed it to that level.
Do you want questions as you go along?
Sure.
So would that apply to renovations as well as new buildings?
It's more than 30%.
I think there's some trigger that at a certain point you're renovating.
Greg?
It'd probably be more like 75%, like if you see housing
Yeah.
guideline, so renovations not.
And I think in 2022 or something, the province is looking at mandating renovations as well. But I don't know the
They'll probably
exact
follow.
but yeah, yeah.
But I would imagine, I would imagine like Greg says, with this point where you trigger for a home warranty, you would trigger for step code. So yeah, so as I said, step code based on performance metrics, which vary depending on climate and the building type. So part 9 of the building code is the most common on Bowen, and probably it's sort of, if you're building a single family house, you're a part 9 building. If you're building a large commercial building or a multifamily, you're a part 3 building. So those are the 2 parts of the BC building code that govern those constructions. So when the BC step code was adopted, it adopted 5 steps for part 9 buildings. So step 1 is to say that you meet the current energy requirements in the BC building code, but you have to do the step of the modeling and the on-site testing to verify that you're meeting the energy requirements that are currently in the BC building code. They then sort of split it out into steps 2 and 3, which are 10% and 20% better than the current BC building code, and what they find is upper steps, so that's 4 and 5, with step 4 being 40% better than the current BC building code, and step 5 being defined as net zero already. So that's what the province has said by 2032, we intend that all BC buildings will be at that step 5 level, they'll be net zero already. And they then, for part 3 buildings, so these are multifamily or large commercial buildings, they instead have it in 4 steps, so step 1, 2, 3, 4, and again, step 1 being meet the current BC building code, but model it beforehand and do on-site performance testing to verify that you sort of built it soundly enough to meet that BC building code emissions. So as of December 15th, 2017, local governments were given the authority to establish bylaw requirements for the STEP code. So to date, 36 communities have announced their intent to implement the STEP code, and many places have. And as we said, the province has set out timing for mandatory STEP code implementation. So they've laid it out, and they increased it, the NDP government increased it in their Clean BC plan to say when you will have to adopt certain steps. In the guide for local government and in their material, they talk about notification requirements that governments to have in terms of adopting steps. So they say if you want to adopt one of the lower steps, they require a 6-month notification period to notify the province and notify essentially the building industry within your community and homeowners and things like that to say in 6 months we're going to look to adopt a step. And for upper steps, they say it's a 12-month notification period. So what we've laid out, so in your report, you'll see what we recommend is that council announce their intent to adopt step 1 of the BC Building Code starting October 1st, 2019. And then what we're recommending is at the same time that we then lay out a target of achieving step 3, so the higher step the year after. So do them both now so that people are aware of the timing that's coming. And so what we recommend is, to announce the notice of the consultation for the BC Energy Step Code, and then through April, October, holding a series of public open houses and workshops. So public open houses in terms of more sort of education awareness, this is what the step code is, these are the steps you need to take, this is the benefits of it. And then the workshops are more of the working with the building industry themselves to say, that hand-on, so either it's building techniques, but really for step 1, it's more about, these are energy modelers that we're aware of, we know about Bowen and have worked on Bowen, and this is how they can help you. So it's sort of hooking up the different parts of the industry together. And then again, following that adoption step 1, then it's doing further work in preparation for moving to a higher step. So what we've outlined here is just we have policies in our future community plan about achieving different levels of energy efficiency, and then our community energy emissions plan as well spoke about step code identification. We have a green building standard for residential rezoning, so that's a policy that was adopted in 2008 that talks about residential development granted through rezoning will meet Built Green, Gold, and EnerGuide 80 standards, and part of this recommendation we recommend updating that to reflect the step code instead so it's consistent. And then finally, funding opportunities. That's some of the opportunities here. So the BC Hydro has implementation funding for residential new construction, and so what they've said is that there's funding for local governments that have committed to adoption of step 1 by December 2019. There's It would offer up to $20,000 for local governments, not for local governments themselves, but incentives or rebates for applicants. So it's potential funding for even building permit fees or rebates, incentives for applicants who need buildings that compliant buildings. So what staff are recommending is council authorize staff to give notice to the Energy Step Code Council of our intent to adopt the BC Energy Step Code Step 1 by October of 2019 and Step 3 the following year. Direct staff to apply for BC Hydro funding. Prepare the series of education and engagement stakeholders, and to draft amendments to the green building policy and also the building bylaw to reflect the step code.
Do we have step 2 in there somewhere?
So what we're recommending is to go step 1 in terms of the current standards and essentially making people aware of the sort of the technical steps or the administrative steps, and then going to step 3. So the work done by the Step Code Council and BC Housing and some of the preparation work was that the cost increase in terms of builders between step 2 and step 3 is fairly minimal for the increased energy efficiency that you gain from it. So a lot of the costs are, with the step code, come to do with modeling and on-site testing that you do. And so that's sort of the one big hurdle is, okay, how do you get through the hoops of doing this and do it? But in terms of once you're doing that, the difference between step 2 and step 3 is more minimal compared to the like the performance gain that you get in the building. And Greg can speak more to it, but we find actually that many buildings, probably the majority of buildings on Bowen, would already are roughly achieving the step 3, regardless if they're built to that standard. It's not the standard that sort of our building industry would have to adapt to. It's more just the that administrative side.
What would you say the normal house on Bowen is, somewhere around 2.3 or something like that? I think it's above 2.
Yeah, it's between 2 and 3 is what I'm seeing on a regular basis. When there's an effort put into it for energy performance, it needs step 3.
Yeah.
Or the conversation with energy modelers or property owners looking into what it would take to get to step 3. Sometimes it's extremely minimal.
Yeah.
So you get to 2.9, which is still a 2, and then you can hit step 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the performance and quality of building that I'm seeing is definitely well above step 1. Thankfully.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Definitely, 2 and 3 are not
that far out. Okay. Anybody else?
Greg, so right now, we're not testing buildings at all, right? And under this current, we would start testing buildings to see.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. Some buildings are being tested, some have to meet energy standards.
Okay.
Energuide 80, which is no longer, as of the end of last year,
Yeah.
but still Energuide is involved. But as of the building code change, we implemented the requirement for air tightness testing, which should have been being done for a number of years. We thought it was an opportune time to, if we're going to do something new, we'll do it with the new building code. So all the new building code requirements for 2018 would require that. So that's showing base performance. You can actually fail an air tightness test on the building and still get certified and occupancy. It's kind of a backdoor approach, but it's kind of an introduction to air tightness testing. So we'll be doing it now.
But we don't do it. They have to hire somebody to do it.
Absolutely.
You don't want to.
They're probably like professionals that do that.
Well, we said we were going to be doing it, so.
We were
literally
requesting it
means
to be
Greg's
done.
out there going to be, so he's going to require it to be done.
Yes.
So,
I think this has just been answered in this conversation, but it was the air tightness question. So basically, they close up all the doors and windows and put the pump on and the air tube in it, and they actually test the pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Gauge the air loss through the exterior, and it's done on a pressurized and depressurized system.
Very good, thank you.
Alice, when are you finished? Any more? I had you down here.
Oh, I had that.
Okay, Dave?
I was pleased to see this. Greg came and we had a good discussion of this at the Environment Committee back, when was that? About 4 months ago, wasn't it? Well, and so this would align with where that committee was going, so I was very pleased to see this. It's good.
Yeah, sorry, Maureen, go ahead.
Slightly tangential. At the Metro Vancouver Parks Committee meeting, we had a presentation of Metro's Sustainable Infrastructure and Buildings Policy. And one of the staff, they mentioned the step code, they're moving towards 3 as well. But they also mentioned something called Envision for Infrastructure. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I was reading about that.
Okay.
No, that would be outside of the building sector. It's more what I'm familiar with, where municipality monitoring their own infrastructure in buildings to increase performance. I think that's probably where that sits.
Okay. The comment that was made was this was the emerging rating system, and I thought, wait a minute, I thought the step code was the emerging rating system. So it might be something for us to take a look at. Not detracting from step code, which is the focus here, and this is terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the,
Envision?
Envision for infrastructure. Envision.
Okay, just Daniel's reading.
I think the timing's good. I'd like to see that little break in there. It's gonna take a while for everybody to spool up and get it done, but it's happening, and it's gotta happen. It's a brave new world, and let's just get on with it. Any other questions before we go back to our regular council meeting? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sarah, Dave, Daniel, awesome, good work. Okay, so we're gonna reconvene, the regular council meeting. 7.5 is now off the board. And 7.6 now. Sarah?
I think that's just.
Or you just, we'll just read the recommendation, that's all. Okay, you can sit down, go sit. Who wants to read that? Oh, thanks, David.
David, go for it.
Yeah, the council authorized staff to give notice to the Energy Step Code Council of Bowen Island Municipalities' intent to adopt the BC Energy Step Code, Step 1 by October 1st, 2019, and Step 3 by October 1st, 2020. The council directs staff to apply for BC Hydro funding for the adoption of the BC Energy Step Code. The council directs staff to educate and engage stakeholders on the requirements of the BC Energy Step Code. The council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the building bylaw to reflect adoption of the BC Energy Step Code, and the council directs staff to draft upgrades to the green building policy to reflect the Step Code.
Awesome. Seconder? Rob? Further discussion?
One question.
Yeah.
Adoption of the BC Energy Step Code or adoption of steps 1 to 3?
It's true, we don't see, oh no, there they are. By October 1st, and Step 3 by October 1st.
Yeah.
No, I think it's, we get clarification, but I think it's just getting into the program.
No, it's the amendment to the
We're
building
committing
bylaw
to the program.
that I'm concerned. What are you amending it for, just for?
Right, and maybe you want that section to reflect what's in the first paragraph, is that?
Mhm. So an amendment to the building bylaw to reflect adoption of steps 1 to 3?
I think add the wording from the first clause altogether, so
Yeah.
Adoption of the BC Energy Step Code at Step 1 by October 1st and
Put
Step
all
3.
that down there.
Yeah. So just repeat it, sorry. Does that make sense? Hope?
Yeah.
All right, any other comments? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. Great.
Well done.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So correspondence.
Sorry, this one slipped by me during, sorry, nothing to do with you guys, so then I'm looking at 8.1, boy, I need to know how to clear a room. Sorry, that one slipped by me, Hope, during the agenda review, but I had sent an email out about this. We received, we were contacted directly by Fraser Basin Council, and I had arranged for Carla to speak to them.
That probably happened while I was away.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want this to get
Yeah.
missed, so,
Yeah.
okay,
So
good, glad
we
it's
got
down
that
there.
one.
I think
So,
they
okay.
already sent me an email, I said I'd talk to them.
Okay.
Okay, 8.1 is
Yeah.
scratched. 8.2.
Well, just a sec, though, out of curiosity, because one of the questions I had about this one, there's a whole series of questions they were going to ask, so would be interested to know what the answers were that we gave to those questions.
I will find out. This was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I was tracking back, because I
Yeah.
thought we'd see something
Yeah, I'd
directly.
send it, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I can follow up with Carla to see.
That would be great.
Little action item there, thank you.
Yeah, just a little quickie one-pager about what the questions were and what she said.
All right, thank you. So Graham Ritchie, 1175 Miller Road, dated February the 5th. I guess, Ian, are you gonna speak to that, or? No. No? Okay. Who is?
You've written about it. I can speak to it. I received an email from Graham last night, and he just wanted to clarify. Sorry, I should further clarify. The gate was working earlier in the morning after it was used by the fire department. I found it forced open and non-operational around midday. So he's reinforcing that it wasn't the municipality who.
So
All right.
he falls to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we just respond to him directly as staff about his concerns. We do need standard operating procedures in place, not so much fire department, but I'm thinking more public works. And we will discuss it at our next managers meeting.
Okay, so the recommendation is the council directs staff to respond to Mr. Ritchie addressing concerns outlined in his correspondence dated February 5th, 2019. And the council directs staff to develop standard operating procedures for situations of this nature where access to private property is required.
Can I propose an amendment? Just to
Yeah.
recognize the email that you received. Could it say February 5th and February, 24th or something?
That's perfect, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And can we post the February 24th one as a?
Yeah, I'll send it to Hope right now.
So that it's, I think it's on the.
Thank you, that just
Yes,
rounds
thank
out the
you.
picture.
So I hope you got the friendly on there?
I got it.
Okay, second?
Yep.
Thank you, as amended. And any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, unanimous. And Bowen Children's Center, request for action on Carter Road, dated January 7th. I don't know who's going to talk to that.
I can talk.
We
about
have
it.
the letters, yeah.
Yeah, what I had suggested that this be referred back to staff for comment, because our previous council dealt with this issue, and it was left in the hands of Bowen Children's Center, if I remember correctly. Hope's pulling together the resolutions. The ball was in their court. Hope, you spoke to Ann Silverman today?
I spoke with Anne this morning. She indicated that the ball was left in their court and it just kind of, something that just was meant to happen that just hasn't. And they're working towards it now. They've engaged an engineer who is going to do work for them to see about making some parking on the road that goes down, some 6 angled parking spaces and how that will look. And they've engaged a contractor to see what that would cost, and so their rough costs are about $20,000. So they are looking forward to, seeing how the municipality can be involved in that. So I said that it's going to be referred back to staff pending this meeting, and so they're aware of that and they are working towards it.
We'll bring forward the historical information because there was a rationale why the municipality couldn't put the speed bumps in at the time.
That's right.
And I think
It's going to be an ongoing concern.
community meetings set up between IPS and
That's correct.
IPS parents and the residents about their.
That's right. That's what I remember as well.
Yeah, that's, it's going to get worse before it gets better there too. So I think they have to come up with a remedy that's going to see them through for the next long while. So there's a recommendation here.
I move the council refer the correspondence from Bowen Children's Center and Corporal Paulo Arriaga to Bowen Island RCMP Detachment Supervisor dated January 7 and 21, 2019, to the Public Works Superintendent for review and comment applicant.
If I could just amend that to Public Works Superintendent and corporate officers, so
Yeah.
we can pull together the historical material as well.
Yeah, I'll second that amendment.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous.
They're so agreeable.
Oh, isn't it nice? It's all warm and fuzzy here.
Take your phone.
Yeah.
I'll speak to the second piece of correspondence from Corporal Arriaga. Again, this was an issue that was dealt with at the last council, and we're asking it to be referred back to staff so we could get that historical information. And there's Graham. Historical information from the last council term of what was discussed, then bring it forward to council.
This is the seniors road?
Seniors
Seniors
Lane. Yeah.
Yes, please, because I've been reading this one carefully. Is this the one with the 10 kilometre?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
I mean, there are some, speaking to our public works manager, there's some suggestions of the idea that should be made a one-way road. One of the issues is the businesses and homes that are accessing it off Seniors Lane. When their legal access is from Miller's Road.
They can't park in front of their places on the road.
Yeah, but that's part of the issues we face. So part of it is, should the municipality be bearing those costs? But I think we'll get some information for our next council agenda.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
That'd be good, because if I can speak,
Yeah,
I'm remembering at the last council too, there was comments from the public asking, Irene Wallace had written to us asking for a crosswalk from Seniors Lane to the pharmacy. Because otherwise.
Thanks,
seniors-
Graham, sorry.
Cheers.
Thank you.
You always do that. Every time on the agenda, you speed up.
Well, put yourself on the agenda more often.
Good line.
But as it is now, the seniors who walk along Seniors Lane to the pharmacy or to get their groceries have to walk down where there's not, where there's sort of that rough gravel edge of the road, cross and then cross again and then cross again to get to the pharmacy. And so people jaywalk. And the question is, to be a more walkable place, that
If you walk across the middle of the road, they don't go down the intersection,
They
just go
walk
straight
across
across.
from Seniors Lane.
that's right. I'm saying, I'm interested in staff comment about the
Yeah,
crosswalk.
so if I can suggest an amendment to a recommendation that council refer the correspondence, comment back to council, as well as reporting back of the idea of a crosswalk from Seniors Lane to
Cross to the pharmacy.
Case Hill.
Yeah.
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 Village Square. Or Village Square.
That would be good.
comfortable with
Thank
it?
you.
Do you want to add in?
Okay, so
So moved.
thank you.
Second.
Second for David. And anyone? Chat? All in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Okay, so, new business. Mayor Gary Andrew, Island Plan 2019. I don't know what to say. I think it's a fantastic plan. Especially the mayor's
Especially the mayor's letter.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments on that at all?
Nicely done.
Well,
Thank you, Maureen.
Maureen,
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you. Amazing job putting that all together. Okay, so I will say that council approved the Island Plan 2019. Have a second? Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
I'm only approving it because I got voted down on the other
Okay.
thing.
Yep.
We'll take your approval any way we can get it.
Okay, 10.2, Maureen.
Yeah, this is a point that we've kind of handled on an ad hoc basis under the previous term. So if a councillor had an interest in attending a particular event or a conference, such as last week, Sue Ellen and David and I attended a 2-day workshop. So we simply made the request and it was approved. And it's always been within a working expectation of what's a reasonable expenditure for council professional development activities. But in this case, one of our committee chairs flagged that there's a heritage conference coming up. It's in Victoria. We were able to attend it last year. So I asked the question again, can we attend it? And I think it raised flags for and the notion that we need a policy came up. So that's what Raj has responded to, and the initial comments sort of parse out the money so that if you look at the 7 councillors, there's X amount per councillor, which is one way to do it. The other point, though, is that there have been different levels of interest on the part of councillors in participating in those kinds of events. So a purely flat across the board allocation is one way to do it, but there may be other ways to do it. There may also be the need for specific councillors to attend particular events because there's a knowledge gap on council and we want to fill that through participation. So I'd like to move the recommendation that council direct staff to develop a policy related to procedures for council professional development opportunities.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? I think it's good, just see what we come back with.
I just wanted to make sure that when you say professional development opportunities, I think there's a difference between maybe attending a conference,
Might
like
be a little narrow.
UCM and professional development opportunities. And professional development, I think, would have to be related to
Education.
an education element that's relevant to here, and there should be a report given back.
Yeah.
And if we're going to conferences, I think, and you're paying for registration, then you have to go to the sessions.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But do you want to change that? I sort of tend to agree with the professional development opportunities. If you want to change that, or
Professional
We
development.
can call it conferences and professional development. I mean,
Yeah.
the word professional development was
Add
meant to
conferences in
capture
there.
both
Yeah.
conferences and professional
Yeah.
development,
Just
but
spell it
we
out.
can add the word conferences and professional development, that way it is all encompassing.
Perfect, yeah. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Hope so, got it all down.
I kind of like Councilor Nicholson's activities instead of opportunities, but that's just me. Is that interests any of you?
Did I say
Yeah.
activities?
You said
I
activities.
said activities. That's because that's the language we use at work.
Freudian
I
slip.
kind of like the.
I like that word. I'll take that as a friendly amendment if you're happy with that.
Friendly amendment.
Activities, yep.
Friendly
So-
amendment two.
What we'll do is we'll look at what other policies are out there, because I totally acknowledge Councillor Nicholson's comments about basically varying levels of participation
Interest.
or
Yeah.
attendance at conferences. So I'll make sure that when we're looking at the policy that we take into consideration those comments as well. That was just I was just averaging
Yeah.
out the numbers and
Mhm.
trying to give an idea of what was there. So.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've got a first and seconder and two friendlies and no further discussion. Ask the question, all in favor? Thank you. Unanimous.
So what about the attendance at the 2019 Heritage Month?
The words in there?
And I'd like to leave that until such time as there's a policy,
Well, when's the conference happening?
a couple months from now.
Okay. It's not gonna
What was
sell
this
out.
discussion? Oh, I see.
I
It
did.
frightened the last ticket
Can I
might be sold.
actually suggest that perhaps council pass a resolution if Councillor Nicholson does want to attend that conference, just in case it does take us a little bit of time to bring that policy
Well,
back.
we've got time to do that. That's why I was worried that the conference is a month from now or 2
Yeah.
months.
Well, we're not putting a pause on it, are we? I mean, why don't we just carry on as we are?
Yeah.
If it's
I
gonna
think
cost
it's not such a
$5,000, we
big
might.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
in
so
the absence
The
of.
conference
We're not-
itself is
not cutting anybody off.
inexpensive, it's the cost of getting there and staying there, but we're still not talking big ticket money. I would certainly recommend that,
Not Paris.
and it's you and one of the members of the Heritage Commission, correct?
The co-chairs.
Yeah, and I think you both found it very valuable attending last year. I received it as well, and it looks like a valuable conference to attend. I suggest council adopt a resolution tonight authorizing the attendance.
Well,
Okay.
but we're putting it back to staff to come back to us, so
I
why
just
don't we
don't,
just let it go?
because we have Hope as corporate officer who's undertaking a referendum by May 4th. We have Raj getting a
Budget year end.
budget year
Budget
end, and
time
I just realistically, I can't see
Sure.
this policy before us in 2 months. There's other priorities for both of them.
What does that
The
recommendation
council
look like?
authorized Councillor Nicholson to attend the
Heritage.
Heritage conference with one of the co-chairs of the committee, something like that.
Yeah.
Second of them.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Further discussion, no. All, ask the question, all in favor?
And it's,
Unanimous. Bye-bye. You're going now. Whether you like it or
I'll give you
not.
my shopping.
Here goes my resolution that is Nordic Council meetings.
It's in May.
Send people to places. Okay, David, Metro Vancouver.
So the meeting there was a board meeting on Friday, and almost the whole thing was closed, so I don't have a lot to say about it, except for the one of the items that perhaps a little bit interesting and relevant is that there was some interest in changing the voting procedures so that all votes are recorded, rather than just the negative if you asked, you want to be recorded. The current policy is the same as ours, is if you ask to have your vote recorded in the negative, then it's recorded, otherwise
Well,
not.
that's, no, our policy is whoever votes in the minority is recorded. So if a motion
Okay, well, whatever, it
passes,
doesn't matter.
yeah.
I'm just telling you what's happening in Metro Vancouver. I guess I'm unclear about that. But anyway, there was a question about transparency, where people would want to know who voted, your full voting record. The trouble is, at a meeting when you've got 40 people voting, that would take a long time to, get everybody's vote. So staff is looking at technology. I guess you guys have the push button system.
Yeah.
So they're looking at technology, and there'll be a report back on that. So the current, just to repeat, the current situation is your vote is recorded only if you ask to have it recorded. No, be a negative vote. But they're looking at whether to change that. So nothing else from that, but we also, 3 of us went to, Swell, Maureen and I went to Council of Councils on the weekend, on Saturday. And it was really good. I could talk, it didn't take too long to go into any details, but what was really interesting is that it was really an attempt to get everybody, all the new councillors, a good understanding of what goes on at Metro and how it's managed. And so what you had is, for most of the committees, the political chair of the committee gave a presentation as to what they were trying to do, and then the general manager, the staff lead, gave then a detailed presentation about what are the actions for this year and so on. And so it was a pretty great session, and it was all very, the mayors were really all quite funny, as well as quite engaged and serious. So it was a very good session. I'll just mention one other thing that we did is the same 3 of us went to this course on environmental economics in the middle of the week as well. And it was interesting, puzzling in many ways, but I think we all got a pretty good understanding of some of the areas where we were a little unclear. But one of the really interesting parts is this work on the Municipal National Assets Initiative. So it's looking at the asset management plan that we have to do with our
Infrastructure.
With our infrastructure. That's the assets that we pay for that are, what do we call them, engineered assets, I guess. And it's putting the natural assets in the same category where you can measure the value of maintaining an area of forest, how it absorbs water, and you don't need to make you don't have to worry about storm damage if you maintain the forest, that kind of thing. So there's been a bunch of work. You all know that Gibson's has done some work on this. There's what I didn't know is a whole bunch of other municipalities are now piloting it, so there's sort of some processes that we could look at. I know also Metro Vancouver, in their Climate 2050 plan, some of the engagement work is looking at actually working with that as well and making it in a kind of a workbook approach that we could all use. So there'll be more about that. Very important. Yeah.
Was Gibson's one of the speakers, by any chance?
No.
Michelle Mona.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was the scientist behind it?
Yeah.
She presented.
This is a foundation. She presented it.
They're starting work on a watershed project, and there's potential for forestry. Basically, the door is open for us to have the conversation, but the reason we didn't pursue this in more detail the last time was because we didn't have our regular asset management plan completed.
Yeah.
So it's
Needs to be
a bit
integrated
down the road.
Yeah. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, David. Islands Trust?
Sure. Since last week, I did have a phone meeting with the executive committee, and most of them were there, but I was in the lobby outside the Green Economics course until I came in. Just want to let you know that there was a good response to the budget consultation that the Islands Trust held. They had 177 responses, so that was about double last year. We'll find out more on March 4th when Executive Council comes here to meet with this council. So that's our joint meeting. And Michael will be happy that the municipal tax requisition has been dropped again by 1%. Julia's combing through, the financial officer's combing through to find places where a better alignment can be found that's fairer. And, well, I shouldn't say that's fair. That makes more sense. And as she goes through the calculations. And they're also, again, as they do every year, asking for an increase in the provincial grant, which is $180,000 from the province, and that kind of thing. And yeah, more stuff. Anyway, I wanted to let you know that the 12.3, items 12.3 to 12.5 in this agenda are all about Islands Trust business, including during the emergencies of the recent storms. Chair Peter Luckham sent a thank you to BC Ferries, who responded in an emergency, bringing flats of water to Saturn Island, I think it was. So many people were out of power with the pumps off. And one island, Cooper Island, sorry, what used to be Cooper is now Penelka Island, lost all its ferry dock and everything. There was no access, so BC Ferries put that back very quickly. And anyway, you can see the other items that are in there, including a couple of letters. I'll draw your attention to 12.5, which is a fairly articulate letter of support for the Bowen tax requisition. And March 4th, they're coming here. They're also doing a survey of their websites. Their Islands Trust and Islands Trust Conservancy want to improve their services and their information to the public. So you're welcome to take this survey on the websites by March the 3rd. So I'm wondering if we can perhaps put that out on our
Push it out on
push it out through our communication channels if there's time. I mean, March 3rd isn't very.
next Sunday.
Yeah. It'd be great. And then we meet with them on the 4th. They come here.
Okay.
Anything for you, Michael?
Yes, I'm just going to report, because I really didn't feel I could do this on Skype last time I was here. Whilst I was away, of course, I was given a copy of is the draft budget for Islands Trust. And what the draft budget showed was an increase from 200 but to round figures, 294,000 to 333,000. And I wrote to Peter Luckham and to their CAO, and I said to them, I realize this is a draft budget, but I am really concerned about these cost increases. And I said, should these cost increases come to fruition, I think it's be very negatively received. And I think it will act as a lightning rod to all those people who are opposed to our involvement with Islands Trust. And I've asked them to please, would they consider my comments in their review of their budget, with the budget which we will either agree or disagree in our meeting in Galliano when we go. And Peter Luckham replied that yes, he would take this under advisement. The second thing I did is I picked a sort of 50, 60 people that I just dropped an email to and said, look, I want you, as an Islands Trust, I want your feedback on this, because there is the potential of this increase. It is mooted in the draft budget, and I repeated draft budget, for Islands Trust. And, I frankly, I need to know what the feelings are on this. Now, please remember that I'm writing this with rather sometimes variable internet connections from India. I have to tell you, the response to those emails was pretty electric. And what I propose to do now I'm back, and by the way, all the responses that I've got, I sent to Peter Luckham and to their CAO and to the head of their finance committee. And I've been assured that they've been forwarded to the appropriate web address for the budget consultation. I will get those printed off so that they can be part of the agenda for your consideration. A lot of the responses I've received were not cut and paste responses. They were extremely detailed, thought out, and amazingly, I would just say detailed responses to my email. And I will have these collated, and they will be part of information for you all for our meeting well prior to the Monday, so you can see the depth of feeling and the depth of input from these very, very individual letters. And I can see why the numbers have gone up in terms of consultation for part of the budget process this year, because I've contributed to it. I forwarded them all, so those numbers are greatly increased through, I've got to be honest, through my forwarding these detailed letters, which you will all have copies of. And I simply haven't, with the ability that I had while traveling, been able to collect them, but you will have them all prior to our meeting with Islands Trust, and you are all obviously capable of drawing your own conclusions when you've read them. So I'll leave that to you.
All right, so.
Yeah, I just, well, since you've been away, I also wrote emails to people that I thought would be interested.
Likewise.
And they responded, and I put an article in the paper, and a bunch of things like that. There is a report, if you wish. It's in the executive committee meeting agenda. Bye, Raj.
Good evening. Here, Raj, thank you.
That's posted at the Islands Trust website that has a report and about all the input that they received. And I also just wanted to flag that the next council meeting, it's not Galliano, it's Gabriola.
It's Gabriola.
Island, which is easy if people, anybody on Bowen wants to come to one of these, you just walk over to Nanaimo and you can actually walk or take the bus to the Gabriola ferry, and it's a little 20 minutes across from Nanaimo, just like
We've got to
Bowen.
work how to get there that morning after tonight's council meeting.
It's
Mhm.
easy.
Yeah.
It's easy, you just catch the morning ferry and
The morning
catch
ferry
the
gets us
11
there.
Yeah,
ferry
it gets
to
us there in
Gabriola.
time,
Yeah.
yeah. So when we meet with Executive Committee March the 4th, we can talk about all the various input from Bowen that they received. But I just want to say, you know, this council did, or Peter Luckham did respond immediately to your concerns, and it is a resolution that was passed at Executive Committee that beyond this budget, they're going to continue looking into it, because it is very detailed calculation, as Allison was partly the architect of it, I gather. She's known it all these years. And it's, we did pass a resolution to look into it.
Yep, indeed, and that was acknowledged to me, no question. And as I said, when you've had a chance to read the correspondence, you'll draw your own conclusions.
I've said, Maureen?
May I ask, do we have an agenda for that meeting?
We're working right now with Islands Trust. It's going to be a joint agenda, and I just forwarded their CAO our adopted strategic plan.
Great, thank you.
So, and hope Sophie's working with Islands Trust staff to formalize the agenda, or is that? Yeah. So Russ and I were, their CAO and I were discussing it last week, and should have it finalized in Wednesday.
You have something to add to that, Allison?
No, I think only 39 people of the 176 were from Bowen, 62 were from Salt Spring in the survey, but there's pages of comments on that people put in. But I just want to register my objection to an iPad being given away in order to get people to complete a survey about the Islands Trust website, which I'm doing.
Lovely. Yeah, should be interesting.
It's what the consultants are doing.
Okay, Allison.
Oh, there hasn't been any meeting since I reported on the 19th.
Okay.
But I just wanted to correct, it should be a report on the Transit Mayor's Council. And then Bowen has been appointed to one of the 3 standing committees, which is called the New Mobility Committee. And everything that was dealt with at that New Mobility Committee was approval of the terms of reference and the receipt of the information about the response to the province's ride-hailing questions. And those I covered at the last meeting.
Any discussion on that UBC line? What happened with that? That line with UBC?
I reported on that at the last meeting. They're doing the next phase of study, and that'll take several months.
How about West Van?
That's
Where's
still,
that at?
it's
Still?
still, there's, West Van is still reviewing, so I just have to draft a letter that we support the B9 because of benefits to the 257.
Yeah. Does anybody have a problem with that?
Yes. I just happened, when coming back, to bump in West Vancouver to a lady who lives on Bowen, who has a retail outlet on Marine Drive. And she apparently had been at some big meeting the night before, was regaling me about this, and I said, I've got to be honest, I've just come back. What I know about this, you could put on the back of a Canada stamp with a broad italic nib. So it ain't much. So, but she was obviously incensed about this beeline, and apparently, but I say apparently, there had been this meeting the day before. So West Van Council are going to get a group of people who are going to say, look, it's a disaster for the retail. And they're going to say furthermore, if you really inhibit the traffic in that narrower part of Marine Drive, you're going to have this traffic making its own way and finding its own way like water always does. It travels downwards and this will go upwards across the small residential streets of West Vancouver, and it's just going to create an absolute liability. Now, forgive me, I'm not in for the rights or the wrongs of this, but what I'm saying is there is very strong opposition to this beeline in West Vancouver. For what it's worth, I just throw it out there. The West Van Council are going to have 2 opposing forces, those for it and those against it. And I'm not into the rights and wrongs of it, I'm just saying there will be a very strong group opposing this beeline in West Vancouver.
No, they actually came to the Mayor's Council and presented a report as to why they felt, and one of their arguments was there wasn't enough traffic volume for it. But it was in the Mayor's vision plan that was approved 2014, I think, the Mayor's vision for the funding, or maybe, and then it's been funded from 24 through. And then for some reason, I don't know whether West Van was not consulted at the time.
Should have been.
It's going right through from, the plan is from Dungrave right through to Phipps. And there hasn't been any feedback on the North Van plan. So West Van Council, I mean, they own the streets that all this is going to go on, so they will have to agree. But from our perspective, for our users that use the 257, it is, so I wasn't planning on just saying, please keep in mind that having a beeline route will be advantageous to the people from Bowen and that do use the 257 and making it more reliable.
Which I guess brings us back to the question, is it good for Bowen or is it good for West Van? I mean,
Sure, this is a West Van question primarily.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Well, I guess it's the regional transportation strategy and the mayor's vision, which was agreed to by the whole of the mayor's council, unanimously included that beeline in there. And it was funded in the phase 1.
Is it a?
We passed this last meeting.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so are we going to revisit it?
No.
Okay, I'm just keen to get on to the closing.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, let's get that. Is that it, Allison?
Yep.
Okay, Maureen?
Metro Parks has not met since our last meeting, but we did get a presentation on parks at the Council of Councils. And Housing and Parks made the classic Bowen mistake of putting up a big picture of
Without
the park system with Bowen not in the corner. So we all sat there and glared at him, quite a distance so he wouldn't have seen it. But the interesting point was I had to leave a wee bit early and I stepped outside and Neil Carley, who was the former head of Parks, said to me, "Did you notice Bowen wasn't there?" And I said, "Yes."
Oh, yes.
And he said, "You gotta train that guy."
Yeah, perfect.
So David did very promptly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a question period?
No, I sent an email to head of Shoemaker, and so South went up. The next time he got up, he apologized for leaving Bowen off that map.
Good for you then. Good for you.
Shades of our.
You mean that at
CMP
Crippen Park off
too.
the map?
Yeah, well, the trouble, I mean, I was involved in doing this all the time with presentations, and to get the whole region.
I know, yeah, we gotta do that.
Yeah, cut off Langley.
What they did later was they, another set of slides that had Bowen up in the right-hand corner. We almost missed it. By then we were looking. But it was there.
But one of the nice things was in the little handout that they had under the regional district capital plan, there are a number of key projects in the parks, and right there is Crippen Park with the budget allocation and with the projected completion date.
Yeah, great.
It's right.
All right, we'll move on to items removed from the consent agenda. 0, thank you.
Is that a first time?
It sure,
From my memory,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll move us right down to question period. What do you got, Brian?
Two. One's for Michael.
Oh.
The 50 letters, are those Islanders?
yes, all Bowen Islands, all residents on Bowen Island,
Okay.
known to me.
Known to you.
I don't think there's 50.
Anything he says in here is,
Right.
what's that called?
Okay.
Privilege.
Privilege.
So I say, he said that.
Right.
But thank you. There, you don't think you should. There was another one. Oh, the committee, that Allison referenced, the one's have been appointed to one of 3 standing committees, the new mobility committee. What does that mean that one's been appointed to this?
Well, they've created 3 separate standing committees.
Is that part of Translate?
That's part of the Translink
Okay.
Mayor's Council.
Okay.
And there's one on governance and one on the regional transportation strategy.
And does that mean you're on it? Or
So,
is it
Bowen, so I go to the new mobility committee because they don't appoint people, they appoint
Okay.
municipalities.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the names of new mobility?
Uber. Well,
Oh, the ride hail.
the ride hail was that, it's new ways of getting around.
Yeah. So
That
could
kind of
that
thing.
also
Get that.
include low speed vehicle, that kind of stuff?
Golf carts.
Passenger ferry?
Yeah, and all that sort of.
Okay, that's a great committee to be on.
All right, well, if that's it, that's a wrap for that part of it. Thank you, Bronwyn.